Good evening, everybody. You can hear me okay, it seems like. It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to be here in this new role. I like to crow about the fact that my first rally was in '93. It was a little different back then, and I did not have any responsibilities whatsoever, unlike this time around. So yes, this week I'm wrapping up my first 9 months with the Alliance, as president at least, and I've made a point in these early days to travel the country as much as possible, to meet as much of our community as I possibly can. My travels so far have taken me to 16 different states and given me the opportunity to meet hundreds of you, and I do hope to meet the rest of you over the next few days and over the next year. I want to mention a few highlights of my travels to date. I've experienced the tremendous beauty of the land that we've all helped protect. This is a photo of me working very hard on an early evening float on the Teton River with in Idaho with the Teton Regional Land Trust. It was a very magical night, and the wildlife and the sunset were just incredible. I visited a 20,000-acre property protected by the Montana Land Reliance along the Beartooth Front, which consists of, yes, please, of prime wildlife habitat on a working cattle ranch. I had the chance to visit Elk Lake in the Adirondack Mountains of New York, which is gorgeous, and it turns out the very first conservation easement in New York State was right there in that photo. Now, I've met some incredible people as well who have conserved their land. This is me with Ted Engel on his beautiful, immaculate farm in northern Michigan. Ted is a fruit farmer who has protected his farm with the help of the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy, using the conservation easement tax incentive that we all just got made, or I can speak actually, we just all made permanent, and his neighbors are now following his lead. So I've even gained some philosophical wisdom as I've traveled the country, and in particular, when I went through Lewiston, Idaho, I found the true words to live by. So, and then in all seriousness, in the end, I found a respite and a place to rejuvenate on land managed by a land trust near where I was living until just a few weeks ago in Brewster, New York. This is the Baxter Preserve in North Salem, New York, managed by the North Salem Open Land Foundation. I can't tell you how many times this year I went to walk the trails and clear my head, so thank you for that. So for those of you who have not yet had a chance to meet me, and especially as I've traveled the country, and even of those of you who have spent some time with me this year, you might be asking where I see our community heading and where my read of the Land Trust community is. I see a community that has grown, professionalized, and demonstrated incredible creativity and sophistication. After all, we created from whole cloth an independent accreditation commission and an insurance company that provides land trusts with the legal firepower they need to protect their conserved lands. We've demonstrated formidable skill in generating resources for land conservation through the passage of state and local ballot initiatives, the creation of new Farm Bill programs, and our successful campaign to make permanent the enhanced federal tax incentive for conservation easement donations. Together, land trusts have protected a staggering 56 million acres of land. And of those acres that are still being stewarded by land trusts, 77% are being held by accredited land trusts. But despite these amazing accomplishments, I can't just say nice stuff the whole time. Despite these amazing accomplishments, we do have much more work to do and under increasingly challenging circumstances. These include continuing population growth, increasing development pressures, especially from fossil fuel and renewable energy development. And of course, we're dealing with increasingly scarce land capital. And we do have a critical vulnerability, one that is not news to any of you. The fact is that most Americans have never heard of land trusts. Likewise, land and land conservation play little or no role in their lives, at least as far as they are aware. we continue to rely upon the support and engagement of a sliver of the American populace, a sliver that is far too uniform in terms of race, ethnicity, age, affluence, and other characteristics. This holds true when we look at the face of America today, but the problem becomes especially acute when we look at the demographic trends over the next decade and beyond. I can think of no better analysis of this challenge than the Conservation Horizons report that came out last year from the California Council of Land Trusts. If you haven't read it, I strongly encourage you to do so. So in short, making land conservation, and land trusts relevant to many more Americans represents our biggest challenge over the next decade. Failing to expand our relevance risks our legacy, both the permanence of our conservation work and our policy victories. And failing to expand our relevance jeopardizes our chances of generating the resources we need to increase the rate of land conservation and protect in time the millions of acres deserving permanent protection. So let's go back to the good news. The good news is that building this relevance is completely within our power. There are so many ways for us to demonstrate the value of land and land conservation to people and for us to better serve their needs. First, we can offer people in-person, boots-on-the-ground experiences. I believe David was just speaking to that. Second, we can speak to people's values, whether they self-identify as liberal or conservative. And third, we can articulate the litany of ways that land plays an important role in improving people's daily lives. So let's start with hands-on experiences. More and more land trusts are seeing the rewards of getting people out on the lands that they have conserved, and even creating what land trust consultant Judy Anderson calls community conservation lands or ambassador landscapes. These are conserved places designed specifically to promote strong emotional connections between people and the outdoors. I saw the power of this concept in action this summer when I visited Rendezvous Park, a project of the Jackson Hole Land Trust and the Rendezvous Lands Conservancy in Jackson, Wyoming, on the banks of the Snake River. Our park, as it is known, is a 40-acre park for all to use, a free, easily accessible open space in which the whole community can experience nature, find inspiration, and discover the importance that a natural setting provides. On top of all this, and this is really important, the park helped raise the profile of the land trust and its eagerness to serve the needs of all people in the community. Over the next few days, you'll hear how other land trusts have created opportunities for people in the communities they serve to get out on the land, specifically people who have not traditionally been engaged in or moved by land conservation. To me, this embodies the essence of community conservation and represents one of the most important things that land trusts can do to build our relevance. Now let's talk values. As we think about how to reach new people in our local communities, we need to be aware of the fact that we often assume that others share our moral values and our motivations. That is often not the case, however, and we need to learn how to frame the issues we care about in a way that uses the values with the greatest resonance for the audiences we are trying to reach. Dr. George Lakoff, a professor of cognitive science and linguistics at UC Berkeley, has written extensively about the importance of environmentalists speaking about the issues they care about in terms of moral values. In his 2010 article entitled "Why It Matters How We Frame the Environment," he explains that people with a liberal worldview are motivated by appeals to empathy, personal responsibility, and the ethic of excellence. These core values lead liberal-leaning people to see the inherent value in the natural world and unleash in them a desire to protect it. But how do we speak to people who self-identify as conservative? In his book, Getting to Green, Alliance board member and author Fred Rich examines this question in depth. He argues that conservative audiences don't respond well to arguments about the intrinsic value of nature. To better reach them, environmentalists should focus on how environmental protection serves the needs of people. And he suggests that we appeal to easily understood virtues such as prudence, responsibility, humility, generosity, courage, and patriotism. The good news, again, is that land conservation fits perfectly within both the liberal and conservative frames and allows us to speak persuasively to people across the political spectrum as we strive to build our relevance. We just need to be conscious about this as we frame our communications with different segments of our local communities. Now, finally, let's take a look at the ways that land serves the needs of people. What better way to make land conservation, and land trusts relevant to more Americans than to highlight the myriad ways we can proudly exclaim, "Land is the answer." Let's make this list and refrain familiar to more Americans, and I'm hoping you're going to join me in a second. How do we secure local, healthy, and sustainable food? Land is the answer. How do we ensure clean and abundant water supplies? Land is the answer. How do we foster healthy child development, physical vitality, and learning? Land is the answer. How do we stem a national health crisis and provide opportunities for people to exercise and recreate? Land is the answer. And how do we make sure that iconic American ways of life, such as hunting, fishing, and ranching, don't die out? Land is the answer. Now, I'd like to add one additional item to this list. How do we mitigate climate change? Land is the answer. I didn't expect you all to join me in that. Oh, but good. Okay. So I'll admit that the more accurate response to that last question would be, land is more than a quarter of the answer. But it's not very catchy. So what do I mean by this? Well, scientists at the Nature Conservancy have determined that protecting, restoring, and changing how we manage land globally could contribute more than a quarter of the greenhouse gas reductions needed to reach the goals of the International Paris Agreement on Climate Change that just went into effect. Our community should seize and promote this remarkable finding, which, as important as it is, doesn't even begin to touch on all the ways that conserved lands can also help people adapt to the impacts of climate change. Now, I understand the argument that we should steer clear of the climate change issue, as it may put at risk the incredible bipartisan support among policymakers that our community enjoys. But I also believe that we have a moral obligation to address the greatest environmental crisis of our time. And I want to stress that I'm not proposing that we do this by getting our community to advocate for a cap-and-trade program or a carbon tax. We can mitigate climate change by doing what we've always done, conserving more land and stewarding land effectively. So, in doing so, we'll also definitively demonstrate our relevance to people and their well-being, while simultaneously bringing home huge financial resources to power our land conservation efforts. Now, I have one qualifier to my call over the last few minutes to emphasize at every opportunity how our work serves people. Let's make sure that we leave room in our movement for individuals like me, who are also motivated to conserve land for the sake of other species and our planet's extraordinary web of life, regardless of how doing so might serve humankind. There are people who claim it is now essentially naive to seek to protect what remains of the wild. They argue that we have moved into a new era known as the Anthropocene, an age in which essentially nothing is left untouched by humankind, and ecosystems should be prioritized for conservation based on a determination of their usefulness to our species. The eminent biologist Edward O. Wilson, in his book Half Earth, prefers a different name for such an era, the Anthropocene, which means the age of loneliness. As he explains it, this would be a world featuring only three components: people, our domesticated plants and animals, and cropland stretching around the world as far as we can see. A world even half that stark and simplified would deeply sadden us all. So again, I ask that we all continue to make room for and continue to respect conservation efforts designed to preserve biodiversity, regardless of any practical benefits to humankind. So finally tonight, I'd be remiss to not acknowledge that we are in the midst of an election cycle that has left many of us baffled, confused, exhausted. Polarization and vitriol have been off the charts, and many feel they no longer recognize or understand the American electorate. Mercifully, the election is only 11 days away. Yes, exactly. So what lessons can we learn from this election cycle? I'm sure there are many, but I want to focus tonight on one broad campaign theme that emerged over the last year and a half and what it might mean for our community. In segments of both the political left and the political right, we have seen discomfort with, if not outright rejection, of the establishment. In particular, there is a palpable sentiment among many voters that the rich, powerful, and connected have gamed the system for their benefit, allowing them to secure huge financial gains, while many regular people languish and fall behind financially. Much of the public is incensed and seeks to end this unfairness. Now, why is this relevant to our community? Because we face the real possibility that this frustration, anger, and distrust will be directed towards us if we do not address head-on the fact that we are seeing people use the enhanced tax incentive for conservation easement donations, the incentive we made permanent in December, to make substantial profits on land held for only a short period of time. Charitable donations of conservation easements need to look and feel like charity to all audiences, including the public, media, and Congress. If conservation easements become associated with transactions characterized by quick, substantial profits, our reputation and that of conservation easements are at risk. This holds true no matter how beautiful and valuable the land is that is protected through these transactions, and I hate to say that, but it's true. Likewise, it holds true even if the transactions have not been deemed illegal by the IRS or Congress. We may not yet have experienced the blowback that will likely come as a result of these transactions hitting the media and the halls of Congress, but I'm not willing to take that chance. This is why the Alliance issued its advisory about these transactions in August, and the current discussion draft of the revised Land Trust Standards and Practices includes parallel language to help Alliance members avoid enabling these transactions. And it is why the Alliance is asking the IRS to issue guidance about these transactions and for Congress, to get involved if necessary. I ask that you join me in ensuring that the integrity of the charitable tax deduction for conservation easement donations and our community's reputation remain intact. Please review our advisory and be vigilant for the indicators of potentially problematic transactions. I note that this December is the one-year anniversary of Congress's vote to make the enhanced incentive permanent. Please make a point of thanking your members of Congress and telling them about the great projects you've done using that incentive. We need Congress to understand the importance and value of our work if the incentive does in fact come under fire. Finally, as the Alliance advances its strategies to address problematic easement transactions, talk about a Freudian slip, we may put out a call for your help. And again, I urge you to answer that call, whether it be placing an op-ed in a local paper, urging your member of Congress to act, or inviting him or her to visit a property you have conserved using the federal tax incentive. The fact is, what we've learned for the last few years, especially last December, is your voices carry tremendous weight on Capitol Hill. So when I considered leaving the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation last year, I could have gone down a number of roads to pursue my environmental interests. I chose to take this job because I believe in private land conservation. I believe in this community, and I believe in the Land Trust Alliance. We truly are in a position to address many of the biggest challenges our society faces, and we have the passion and the power when we come together to make that happen. For 9 months, I've witnessed and lived the great work of land trusts around the country, diving deep into the challenges and opportunities that we face. It's been a great first 9 months. Thank you all for welcoming me and for sharing with me your ideas for how best to protect the land. I am humbled by your dedication. I am inspired by your passion, and I am comforted by your friendship. Land is the answer. and together we will accomplish great things in the years to come. Thank you and good night.